Hey everyone, it's Kong again, and here's another episode of Should You Summon? As always, I'm going to be presenting high-level overviews using these 4 criteria to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers and crystals, how these characters fit into your team, whether they unlock any bonds for other characters, what kind of content they get used for, and their future availability. So let's dive right into this Destiny banner featuring ARES, Noemi, and Maiya, running from February 25th to March 10th. As a Destiny banner, the first SSR that you pull is guaranteed to be one of these 3 that you don't already have. After you do pop that first SSR, or if you already have all 3 of these characters, then it's just a normal rate-up banner, and the usual off-banner rates apply. So let's get started with ARES. ARES is a top-tier PvP threat with an oppressive effective range and great AoE and single-target DPS potential. His talent increases his stats depending on how many enemies are nearby, and also allows him to move through enemies. His 3-cost skill lets him move again with his remaining movement +4 in straight lines, and gives him +20% attack and some post-battle healing. This is when you can either use his single target skill to try to snipe a unit, or his AoE skill to splash damage at a clump of enemies. Afterwards, he teleports any enemies within 2 rings to be beside him, and hits them with another AoE blast. If you moved through an enemy on the way in and picked up a talent stack, then you can move an additional 4 spaces to get away. Not so coincidentally, ARES also has a new free skin available this week, and this is one of the free skins that came as a result of ARES winning the male division of a fan voting contest that happened in China a few months ago. So, as long as you're participating in the login event, you'll get a little pack that gives you either ARES skin or a Lana skin. You get to pick one for free, and the other one you can get in the shop. Anyway, he's a member of LANGRISSER REINCARNATION, buffed by himself and Hilda, Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, Lance, and Rosenseal, and Protagonists, buffed by Matthew. His fusion power grants +5% damage dealt per enemy within 3 spaces, up to 20%. For bonds, he unlocks the attack bonds for Bannermate Maiya, as well as Rosalia and the upcoming Toa, and the defensive bond for Licorice. For his own bonds, he needs Maiya for his defensive bond and Bozel for his attack bond. For content, in PvE, he's on faction for Phoenix and Valkyrie in the Eternal Temple, and Sleipnir and Hugin and Munin in Ancient Beckoning. To be honest, he's not often touted as much of a PvE unit, but I actually do find him to be a good tool in an AoE bomb team for general-purpose PvE like Timeless Trials, since he can charge through frontliners and vacuum nearby enemies into a convenient cluster to set them up for your follow-up AoEs. Obviously, where he really shines is in PvP. His 3C gives him the ability to launch a spring-loaded attack from far away, which means your opponent always has to be on their toes counting tiles. If he does manage to get an opening, his displacement can muck up enemy formations, so just make sure you have a good follow-up attack ready to take advantage. A jacked up ARES with Judge Talisman can also dive in and splash squishy holy units. The bottom line is he really works well in a variety of box styles. And he's a common early ban because of how disruptive he can be, especially on the Sky map. For availability, ARES doesn't show up on another banner until August at the earliest. Now moving on to Noemi. Noemi is a single-target magical DPS with some self-buffing and range-extending capabilities. Her talent buffs up her int as long as she doesn't have too many debuffs. After her first turn, and when she dies, she gives her allies a shield that can conditionally half their damage taken on the next attack. And the way this works is, if the attack doesn't meet the conditions, so it doesn't half the damage taken, it doesn't take the stack off. They keep the defensive stack until it actually trips. So obviously if she's dying before the rest of your units, then she gets a chance to give you this special defensive buff twice. Once after her first turn, and once when she croaks. Anyway, her 3-cost skill is a self-buffing active assist skill that boosts her damage dealt, reduces incoming damage, increases range by 2, and grants her self-healing and debuff dispelling for the next 2 battles that she initiates. This is actually 3 if she's wearing her unique helm, which is coming to global servers in June. She's a member of LANGRISSER Reincarnation, buffed by ARES and Hilda, and Legion of Glory, buffed by Ledin, Elwyn, and Grenier. For bonds, she still doesn't roadblock any other character's bonds, and for her own, she needs 66% of the Jessicas, the OG for her defensive bond, and Young Jessica for her attack bond. For content, she's on faction for Hugin and Munin, and starting next month, Sleipnir in Ancient Beckoning, and she should be a great pick against Scylla in the Eternal Temple. Her extra range is tied to her 3C uptime though, so she won't be able to cheese the whole fight. She will of course be useful against the pesky Ice Dragon as well. In PvP, Nomi's original PvP problem was her factions, launching in pre-Hilda LANGRISSER Reincarnation and pre-SP Elwyn Legion of Glory. Now that set of factions is dramatically improved, although she was just power crept by the Light of Genesis last week. Still, her combination of Talent Int, 3C plus damage stacks, and sorceresses with a 40% attack mod makes her a great single target nuke. Her extra range is of course excellent, and her ability to embulken the rest of your team can give you some leeway to get set up before the all-out fighting begins. For availability, Noemi doesn't show up on another banner before August at the earliest. And finally, moving on to Maiya. Maiya's a niche mage with a mix of single target and AoE spells. Her talent removes a buff from the enemy before dealing damage, and also increases their damage taken. It also gives her extra int if she's close to enemies, and removes a debuff from nearby allies. Her 3-cost skill is a big AoE blast centered on her position that has an interesting chain debuffing mechanic. At a baseline, it removes one buff and replaces it with a debuff on every enemy in the range, and this effect actually cascades if the target is a demon, so it keeps removing buffs and replacing them with debuffs until all their buffs are gone. The skill also does the flip side, it dispels a debuff from allies in range, or all debuffs for holy type units. She also just got access to a great unique weapon this month. It's a broom that passively makes her a flying unit, and it lets her dispel yet another debuff after ending her turn, and it lets her AoE spells clear enemy terrain effects. She's a member of LANGRISSER Reincarnation, buffed by ARES and Hilda, and Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, Lance, and Rosenseal. For bonds, she unlocks the defensive bonds for ARES, Rosalia, Towa, and Tsubame, and for her own bonds, she needs Narm for her defensive bond and ARES for her attack bond. For content, in PvE she's on faction for Valkyrie in the Eternal Temple and Sleipnir in Ancient Beckoning. Her magic could also make her helpful against the Ice Dragon if you don't have any other strong casters already. In PvP, both LANGRISSER Reincarnation and Empire's Honor are coming into their own this season, so she could certainly find a place in some on-meta boxes, although she might not be much of a game changer herself. Her heavy debuff removal might be overkill alongside Rosenseal, although she could be a good option against debuff teams that first ban her. Apart from that, demons still don't show up too often in Apex, but being able to clean up terrain effects could be helpful against stalling sages or licorice, characters like that. If I sound like I'm kind of wishy-washy on her, it's because she doesn't have one solidly OP play like some of the other PvP champs do. She's more of a niche unit, which means devoted players will certainly still be able to build her to be quite effective, but it just won't be as easy or obvious for most players. For availability, Maiya also doesn't show up on another banner until August at the earliest. Just to clarify, none of these 3 characters is confirmed to show up in August, it's just that that's as far ahead as we know from the Chinese schedule. Okay, so here's the quick and dirty. ARES is a dominant flying DPS who can move through enemies. He unlocks attack bonds for Maiya, Rosalia, and Towa, and the defensive bond for Licorice, and he has a faction buff for LANGRISSER Reincarnation. Noemi is a single-target magical nuke who buffs her own range and damage. She has a summon and some terrain effects, and she has a great unique helm coming in June. Maiya is a more niche mage who cleans up buffs and debuffs. She unlocks defensive bonds for ARES, Rosalia, Towa, and Tsubame, and she has a unique weapon that removes enemy terrain effects. Finally, just the usual note about upcoming banners. Next week we're supposed to be getting a rerun of one of the best classic recurring banners featuring Yulia, Jugler, and Landius, all 3 essential units. The next new characters, Hilda and Werner, should be coming the week after that, on March 11th. Hilda's the latest in a string of essential PvP units, so I hope your voucher and crystal stockpiles are healthy. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments if you've been nursing a Destiny guarantee for one of these characters, or if you're just gonna keep hoarding for someone else in the future. I totally skipped Noemi's launch banner, so I'm gonna try to pick her off here, knowing it'll cost me 100 vouchers at the most. So nice to have one of those Destiny guarantees. Hopefully it'll take way less than that so I can carry some of those vouchers forward. Anyway, as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next Should You Summon.